American journalist Henry Hazlitt once said, "Inflation is not only unnecessary for economic growth, as long as it exists, it is the enemy of economic growth." Inflation is an economic struggle that impacts every American in their day-to-day lives. It impacts the prices and the way we live. In giving this speech, I wish to educate people on how inflation continues to go up, but not wages, to show how this affects people in different ways. First, I'll talk about the differences between prices in the past 4 years. Then I'll talk about how this is impacting Americans. And lastly, I will talk about how wages have stayed the same while inflation has gone up. To start, let's discuss the differences between prices in the past 4 years and how they've gone up. First, prices have raised in the past 4 years due to pandemic and increasing demand for items. Foster stated in an article from Bankrate on October 10, 2024, the current inflation rate is 2.4%, back to levels last seen in February 2021. Prices are still 21.4% more expensive since the pandemic-induced recession began in February 2020. Here we have a chart of the month-to-month inflation rate as it's gone in September of 2024. As you can see, it's done nothing but gone on a steady increase, dropping slightly, but still staying pretty high. Next, let's talk about how rising prices are impacting Americans day to day. Inflation not only affects the prices of products, but whether or not people can buy them. The International Monetary Fund, in an article found in October 20th, 2024, stated, in an inflationary environment, unevenly rising prices inevitably reduce the purchasing power of some consumers. And this erosion of real income is the single biggest cost of inflation. Inflation can also distort purchasing power over time for recipients and payers of fixed interest prices. Here we have a chart showing how inflation has risen over the years since 2014. Prior to the pandemic, inflation had been going up, but around the time of the pandemic, it shot way up and has since stayed there. Here we have a grocery cart. Back in the days, groceries, let's say if you spent $100, $100 could possibly get you 2 full carts of groceries. Nowadays, you're lucky to even have half of that because inflation is just constantly rising. Finally, let's talk about how wages have stayed the same while inflation has made the price of goods go up. Even though prices have gone up, wages have not, and have kept the cost of living. Even though the prices have gone up, wages have not kept up to keep the cost of living down. Michelle Gould and Bibbins stated in an article from January 6, 2015, wage stagnation for the vast majority was not created by abstract economic trends. Rather, wages were suppressed by policy choices made on behalf of those with the most income, wealth, and power. Now, wage stagnation following inflation, as listed on the charts here, has pretty much stayed very low in the year since 2000, but increased up until the year 2004. Now, it is steadily going up and down every month, and right now we're currently at 2.4, with the next inflation rate becoming available on November 13th. In conclusion, inflation is an economic struggle that impacts every American in their day-to-day lives, and it is important to know about its ongoing effects and its changes. In this speech, I have talked about the differences between prices in the past 4 years. I've talked about how this is impacting Americans. And lastly, I've talked about how wages have stayed the same while inflation has gone up. In giving this speech, I hope that I educated people about how inflation continues to go up, but not wages, and show how it affects people in many ways. As someone affected by these inflation prices while living on a low wage, I hope that you will keep yourself informed so we can fight for our economy to be fixed. To end, here is the quote that I started with. Inflation is not only unnecessary for economic growth, as long as it exists, it is the enemy of economic growth. Thank you.